The ceiling tiles in this hospital ward have these tiny little holes in them, and if you stare at them long enough, they start to look like stars in a very dark, very cold sky. I've been staring at them for 4 days now, ever since they brought me back from a place that doesn't have ceilings or walls or the smell of bleach. Today is March 29th, 2026, and I'm sitting here in a room in Gary, Indiana, trying to make sense of why I'm still breathing when the machine said I shouldn't be. I've spent 15 years working the floor at the plant just outside of town. It's hard work, the kind that turns your hands into leather and makes your back ache before the sun even goes down. I'm a simple woman. I've raised my kids, I've paid my tithes at the little chapel down the street, and I've always believed that if you do right by people, the world will do right by you. But the world I saw 4 days ago isn't the one we're living in right now. It's a world that's about to break. And it starts with a silence that most of us aren't ready to hear. It was Wednesday, March 25th. I was doing a walkthrough on the South Line, checking the pressure gauges on the high-temp steam pipes. Everything felt normal. The same hum of the turbines, the same heat radiating off the metal. I remember looking at my watch, thinking about what I was going to cook for dinner, when I noticed a tiny hiss coming from a joint near the ceiling. I didn't even have time to shout a warning. The pipe didn't just leak, it disintegrated. 1 second I was standing on the concrete floor, and the next, a wall of white, scalding pressure hit me. I didn't feel the burn at first. I just felt this massive, invisible hand pick me up and throw me across the room. I hit the steel racking, and then everything went quiet. Not the quiet of a room after a loud noise, but a deep, heavy silence that felt like being underwater. I could see my body lying there, crumpled near the assembly line. I saw my supervisor, Pete, running toward me, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. I wasn't in my skin anymore. I was floating near the rafters, looking down at the steam and the chaos, and for the first time in 41 years, my back didn't hurt. The heavy weight I've carried since my husband passed away, the worry about the mortgage and the kids' tuition, it just evaporated. I felt this pull, like a magnet was tugging at my soul. I wasn't scared. I felt a warmth coming from behind me, a light that didn't hurt my eyes but felt like it was made of pure liquid peace. I turned around, and that's when I saw him. He wasn't a painting or a statue. He was real, standing there in a way that made the factory floor look like a blurry dream. He had skin the color of the earth after a rainstorm and eyes that seemed to see every prayer I'd ever whispered into my pillow at night. When he looked at me, I didn't feel like a factory worker from Gary. I felt like a daughter who had finally come home after a very long shift. "Claudia Torres," he said. His voice didn't come through my ears. It vibrated in the center of my chest, like the low note of a church organ. "It is not your time to stay, but it is your time to see." I wanted to stay. I wanted to wrap myself in that peace and never look back at the gray skies of Indiana. But he reached out and touched my hand, and suddenly, the light changed. We weren't in the factory anymore. We were standing high above the Great Lakes, looking down at the curve of the earth. I could see the lights of Chicago and Detroit and the dark, cold expanse of Lake Michigan. "Look at the water, Claudia," he told me. I looked down, and at first, everything seemed fine. But then I saw it, a shift in the atmosphere, like a shiver running through the air. He showed me a date, April 19th, 2026. It was less than a month away. I saw the massive pumping stations that draw water from the lakes. I saw the filtration plants that keep millions of people alive. Suddenly, the hum of the machinery stopped. It wasn't a power outage. It was something deeper. The sensors in the water began to flash red. A sudden, unexplained change in the chemical balance of the lake water, something triggered by a shift in the Earth's crust beneath the lake bed, made the water untreatable. I saw the faucets in houses across Gary and Chicago sputter and go dry. I saw people opening their taps, expecting life, and receiving only a hollow hissing sound. "The first test is the thirst," Jesus said. His face was full of a sadness that felt as old as the world. "People think the water will always flow because they have turned the pipes into their gods. They have forgotten that I am the spring of life." I watched a mother in a small apartment in Chicago. It was April 20th, the day after the pumps failed. She was holding an empty plastic pitcher, staring at her kitchen sink with a look of pure terror. She went to the store, but the shelves were already empty. The lines for the emergency tankers stretched for miles, and the sun was starting to get hot. I felt her panic in my own throat. I wanted to tell her to fill her tubs, to store what she could now, but I was just a ghost in the vision. I need to process this, even now, lying in this bed. Why would he show me this? I'm just one woman. I've got no power, no platform. But then I realized I have a voice. I'm a mother, a neighbor, a worker. If he showed me, it's because someone has to tell the truth before the taps go silent. I look at the water pitcher on my bedside table right now, and I realize how much we take for granted. We think we're so advanced, but if the water stops for 3 days, we're just animals in a cage. Jesus turned to me again, and the vision shifted. The dates moved forward, and the air grew warmer. The water is the warning, Claudia, he said, but the fire comes in the summer. The nurses come in and out, checking my IV and whispering about how it's a miracle I'm even talking. One of them, a girl no older than my daughter, asked me if I remembered the explosion. I told her I remember the peace more than the pain. She just patted my hand like I was a confused old woman, but she didn't see the look in Jesus's eyes. She didn't see the way the sky over Gary turned into a window, showing me things that haven't happened yet. I'm sitting here with a plastic cup of water, and every time I take a sip, I feel like I'm drinking something sacred because I know exactly when that water is going to stop. After Jesus showed me the empty pipes on April 19th, he didn't let go of my hand. The light around us seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat made of gold. He didn't just show me the disaster. He showed me the week leading up to it. He called it the quiet week. He told me that from April 12th to April 18th, 2026, a specific kind of silence is going to fall over the hearts of people across America. This is the week of the inner room, Claudia, he told me. His voice felt like warm oil being poured over a wound. Before the water fails, I will move through the houses of those who still call my name. I will ask them to look into the corners of their souls they have kept hidden. The anger they hold against their neighbors, the pride they take in their own hands, the things they worship more than the one who gives them breath. I saw a vision of a house in a suburb outside of Detroit. It was a nice house, with a mowed lawn and 2 cars in the driveway. It was Tuesday, April 14th. I saw a man sitting in his living room, staring at a screen. Suddenly, he felt a heaviness in his chest, a sudden, sharp memory of a brother he hadn't spoken to in 6 years over a stupid argument about money. I saw him reach for his phone, his hands shaking. He wasn't doing it because he was scared of a blackout. He was doing it because the Spirit was pulling at him so hard he couldn't breathe. If they do not use this week to clean their houses, Jesus warned, the thirst of April 19th will be more than a physical trial. It will be a prison of their own making. Those who do not forgive, while the water still flows, will find that bitterness is a salt that makes the coming drought unbearable. I've been thinking about that since I woke up. I thought about the girl on the night shift who always ignores me when I say hello. I thought about the foreman who cut my hours last Christmas. It's so easy to hold on to those little stings, to let them turn into a hard shell around your heart. But looking at Jesus, I realized that those things are just heavy stones we're carrying for no reason. In the factory, we have a quiet room for when the noise gets too loud and you need a break. That's what he's giving us. 7 days to shut out the world and fix what's broken inside before the world outside starts to crumble. I asked him, Lord, what about the people who don't hear you? What about the ones who just think it's another week? He didn't answer with words. He showed me the dates again, glowing in the air, April 12th through April 18th. I saw people during those days filling their basements with bottled water and canned food, but their hearts were full of greed. They were buying things they didn't need, hoping to sell them for a profit when the crisis hit. I saw the food in their pantries starting to rot before the seals were even broken. Preparation without prayer is just vanity, he whispered. I'm just a woman who works a machine. I don't know how to explain the spiritual mechanics of what I saw, but I know it was as real as the steel pipe I used to check. I felt the heat of the July sun before he even moved the vision forward. The air in the hospital room felt cold, but in the vision, the heat was a physical weight. We moved from the quiet week and the dry taps of April into the heart of the summer. The date July 4th, 2026 appeared like a firework that didn't go out. I saw the highways in Indiana and Illinois. It was a holiday, a day for family and grilling and celebrating, but the roads were eerily empty. I saw gas stations from Gary all the way down to Indianapolis with bags over the pump handles. The dry pump, Jesus called it. I saw a father trying to fill his tank at a station in Chicago. He was swiping his card over and over, but the screen just stayed black. It wasn't that the electricity was gone. The lights in the station were still on. But the system that moves the fuel, the massive network of pipes and trucks that keeps the country moving, had simply ceased to function. I saw the trucks parked in rows at the distribution centers, their drivers sitting on the tires with their heads in their hands. The oil is the blood of this world's pride, Jesus said. When it stops, the heart of their economy will stop. They have built a kingdom on the speed of their wheels, but I will bring them to a standstill so they can find the path to my feet. I felt a panic watching it. I thought about my own old car sitting in the factory parking lot and how I'd be stranded without it. But then I looked at the people who had used the quiet week in April to get right with God. I saw a group of families in a small neighborhood in Gary. They weren't fighting over the last gallon of gas. They were sitting on their porches, sharing a meal they had cooked over a simple wood fire. They had stored a few things, sure, but the main thing they had was each other. I saw a man on a bicycle riding 3 miles to bring a loaf of bread to an elderly woman who couldn't leave her house. I realized then that the dry pump wasn't just a disaster. It was a separation. It was a line drawn between those who depend on a system they can't control and those who depend on a Father who never fails. I felt this deep, aching need to tell my kids to buy bicycles, to find a way to cook without a stove. I have to stop trusting in the things that come out of a pump. I looked at Jesus and I asked, "How long, Lord? How long will the pumps be dry?" He looked out over the darkened highways of America, and for a moment, the light around us seemed to dim, reflecting the struggle of the people below. "Long enough for the world to realize that their silver and gold cannot buy them a single mile," he replied. "The July heat will test the patience of many, and by the time the leaves begin to turn, the world will be a different place. But the third darkness is the one that will decide the fate of the nation." I'm sitting here in this bed, and I can still feel the vibration of those dry pumps in my bones. It's like an engine that's finally run out of oil and just seized up. I know people will say I'm crazy. They'll look at the gas prices today and say they're high, but they're still there. They'll say the water is fine, but I saw the calendar. I saw the dates, and I saw the face of the one who holds the calendar in his hands. The nurses think I'm just resting, but I'm really just trying to keep my eyes closed so I can see it all again. If I open them, I'm back in this sterile room with the squeaky floor wax and the distant sound of sirens on Broadway. But when I close them, I'm back with him, and the world feels like a map spread out on a table, waiting for the wind to blow it away. I keep thinking about my hands. I've used these hands for 20 years to tighten valves and lift heavy crates, thinking that's how I was providing for my family. But Jesus showed me that the work I was doing was just a shadow of what really matters. He showed me that we've all been building houses out of toothpicks and calling them fortresses. Why did he pick me? A woman who spends her shifts covered in grease and steam. I'm no preacher. I'm just Claudia from the South Side. But maybe that's the point. The warning isn't for the people in the tall buildings in Chicago. It's for the people who actually know how to get their hands dirty. As the vision of the dry pumps in July began to fade, the heat stayed in my skin. It was a heavy, suffocating feeling, like being trapped in a car with the windows rolled up. Jesus led me through a street in Detroit, and it looked like a graveyard of modern life. Cars were just sitting there, abandoned in the middle of the road because there wasn't a drop of gasoline to be found. I saw a man trying to push his truck toward a station, his face purple from the effort, but he eventually just sat down on the curb and cried. He had a wallet full of money, but no one was taking it. "The currency of the heart is the only thing that will spend in those days, Claudia," Jesus said. He pointed to a small house where a group of neighbors were gathered. They were trading things. Real things. I saw a woman giving a bag of dried beans to a man in exchange for a hand-cranked radio. I saw someone trading a heavy wool blanket for a gallon of clean water. Then he looked at me with a look that felt like it was etching words into my soul. Tell them to gather $2,000 worth of trade goods, not for greed, but for mercy. Tell them to store the things that the world will forget they need until they are gone. Seeds that have not been changed by man, simple tools that do not need a plug, and the medicines of the earth. In the days of the dry pump, a bag of salt will be worth more than a stack of hundreds. I felt a sharp pang of worry. $2,000 is a lot of money for a family like mine. I thought about my savings account, how I'd been tucking away a little bit every paycheck for a new roof. But as I watched the man in Detroit staring at his useless truck, I realized that a new roof wouldn't matter if there was no way to get food to the table. I realized that the things we think are security are just illusions we've been sold by people who want our money. My internal clock was spinning, and I felt this desperate need to get back, to go to the store, to start gathering what I could. I felt like a mother watching her children play near a cliff, unable to scream a warning. Jesus must have felt my heart racing because he put his hand on my shoulder. The heat of the July vision vanished instantly, replaced by a crisp, sharp chill. The calendar in the sky flipped past August and September, through the rain of October, and stopped on a day that usually brings joy. December 25th, 2026. I saw the city of Gary covered in a layer of frost so thick it looked like the buildings were made of salt. The wind coming off Lake Michigan wasn't just cold, it was lethal. It was the kind of cold that turns the air into glass, making it painful to even take a breath. I looked at the houses, expecting to see the twinkling of Christmas lights, but the whole city was a void. Not a single bulb was burning. The third darkness is the deep freeze, Jesus said, and his voice sounded like the cracking of ice on the lake. It is the moment when the voice of the world goes silent. I looked up at the sky, and there were no planes. I looked at the cell towers standing like frozen skeletons over the landscape, but there were no signals. The phones that people usually keep glued to their palms were nothing more than cold pieces of glass and plastic. The entire communications network of North America had simply ceased to exist. It wasn't just a power outage, it was a total severance. They have used their machines to drown out my voice, he said. They have used their screens to hide from their neighbors. So, on the day the world celebrates my birth, I will give them the gift of silence. For 3 days, there will be no way to call for help, no way to check the news, and no way to look away from the person sitting across from them. I saw a vision of a family in a high-rise in Chicago. They were huddled together under every coat they owned. The husband was clicking his phone over and over, his face lit by the dim, dying glow of the battery, but there was no service. He looked at his wife, and for the first time in years, they actually had to talk. They had to pray. I saw them hold hands and start to recite the Lord's Prayer, their breath coming out in white puffs in the freezing living room. But then the vision shifted to the streets, and it was horrifying. I saw people who hadn't prepared, people who hadn't listened to the warnings in April or July. They were wandering through the snow, looking for a place with heat, but there was nowhere to go. The community centers were dark. The hospitals were running on the last of their failing generators. I saw the number 25 million written in the frost on a window pane. 25 million souls will not see the spring, Jesus said softly. Not because I have abandoned them, but because they built a world that cannot survive without a wire. They chose the warmth of the machine over the warmth of the spirit. I felt the cold seep into my bones, even in the afterlife. I thought about the winter coats in my closet, wondering if they were thick enough. I thought about my neighbors, the ones who don't even know how to start a fire in a grill. The weight of the message felt like it was crushing me. Why me? I kept asking. Why show a factory worker the end of the world as we know it? Jesus turned me toward him, and the cold vanished, replaced by that liquid golden light. Because, Claudia, the workers are the ones who know how to build. When the machines fail, it is the ones who have worked with their hands and prayed with their hearts who will lead the others to the light. The December freeze is not the end of the story. It is the birth of a new one, but my people must be ready to be the heat in the darkness. I looked back at the frozen map of Indiana, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Scattered throughout the darkness were tiny, glowing points of light. They weren't electric. They were coming from inside the houses. I watched those tiny lights flickering in the dark of that frozen December vision, and I realized they weren't coming from the windows at all. They were coming from the people. It was like each person who had spent the year praying and preparing had a small candle burning right in the center of their chest. I looked at a small house on a side street in Gary, a place I pass every day on my way to the plant. Inside, there were maybe a dozen people huddled around a wood stove. They weren't just staying warm, they were glowing. I could see the light from one person flowing into the next, creating a shield that the freezing wind couldn't touch. The light you see is the oil of the Spirit, Claudia, Jesus told me. He was looking at the small group with a pride that made the whole afterlife feel brighter. They didn't just buy blankets and beans. They bought time in the secret place. They spent the months of the dry pump and the weeks of the thirst learning how to hear my whisper when the world was screaming. Now, when the wires are dead and the screens are black, they are the only ones who can still see the path. I felt this deep, heavy realization sink into me. I've always thought of being prepared as having a full pantry and a full tank of gas. I grew up in a neighborhood where you look out for yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you. But Jesus was showing me something completely different. He was showing me that the trade goods he mentioned weren't just for survival. They were for connection. You don't store $2,000, Smee, worth of tools and seeds just to hide them in a basement. You store them so you can be the one who opens your door when the neighbor comes knocking in despair. I started thinking about my own street. I thought about Mrs. Gable next door, who's 80 and can barely walk to her mailbox. I thought about the young couple across the way who just had a baby and probably don't even own a manual can opener. If I only prepare for myself and my kids, I'm just as lost as the people who didn't prepare at all. The light only burns when it's shared. That's the spiritual mechanic of the new world. If you try to hoard the light, it goes out. Jesus moved the vision again, and I saw something that looked like a miracle, but felt as natural as breathing. I saw a man in Detroit during the December freeze. He was sitting in his kitchen, his head bowed. He didn't have a phone or a radio, but suddenly he stood up and grabbed a heavy coat and a small bag of medicine. He walked 3 blocks through the drifting snow, straight to a house he'd never visited before. He knocked on the door, and a woman answered, sobbing because her child's fever wouldn't break. "How did you know?" she whispered. "I heard a call," the man said. I looked at Jesus, my mouth hanging open. "Lord, was that?" "The spirit wind," he answered. "When the machines of man are silenced, the network of my children will finally be clear. They will hear each other's needs across the valleys and through the city walls. They won't need a satellite to tell them where the hungry are. They will feel the hunger in their own spirits, and they will go. This is the restoration of the body. But you must have ears to hear it, and you must have the courage to move when you are called." I'm sitting here in this hospital bed, and I keep thinking about my hands again. I've spent my life following instructions on a factory screen, waiting for a light to turn green so I can pull a lever. But Jesus is calling me, and everyone listening, to a different kind of work. We've been trained to be passive, to wait for the government or the utility company or the internet to tell us what to do. But in the world he showed me, there is no them. There is only us, and there is only him. I looked at the date again, April 12th through April 18th, the quiet week. I realized that this week is the most important part of the whole timeline. It's like a training camp for the soul. If you can't hear him during those 7 days of silence, you won't hear the spirit wind when the December freeze hits. You won't know which way to walk when the gas is gone and the roads are blocked. The trade goods are the bridge, Claudia, Jesus said, pulling my attention back. Tell them to gather the simple things: hand saws, manual drills, heirloom seeds for cabbage, potatoes, and grain, needles, and heavy thread. These are the keys to the kingdom of the earth. When the high-tech world collapses, The one who can mend a coat or plant a row of greens will be the one who can preach the gospel. They will listen to your words because your hands have already shown them my love. I started making a list in my head. I've got about $500 under my mattress at home, meant for the property taxes. I realized I'm going to spend it on manual tools and bulk salt. I'm going to find the old cast iron pans my grandmother left me and make sure they're clean. I'm going to stop looking at my phone and start looking at the sky, trying to learn the rhythm of the weather. But then a fear hit me. What if my neighbors think I'm hoarding? What if they come for what I have before I can even share it? In Gary, things can get desperate fast. I've seen what happens when people think there isn't enough to go around. Jesus didn't say a word, but he showed me a vision of a house during the dry pump in July. A group of men were standing on the lawn, holding bats and pieces of pipe. They looked hungry, and they looked mean. They were staring at a house where they knew there was food. I saw a woman walk out onto the porch. She didn't have a gun. She had a loaf of bread and a pitcher of water, the last of her supplies. She didn't yell. She just sat down and started to pray out loud. I saw a golden hedge, like a wall of vibrating air, rise up around the perimeter of her yard. The men tried to step onto the grass, but it was like they hit an invisible wall of heat. It didn't hurt them, but it made them stop. They dropped their weapons and just stood there confused. Then the woman broke the bread. She walked to the edge of the hedge and handed a piece to the leader. "Take what I have," she said. As he took the bread, I watched it. It didn't just disappear. As she broke it, the loaf stayed the same size. She kept breaking it, and every man on that lawn got a full meal. By the time they were done, the anger had left their eyes. They weren't a mob anymore. They were a congregation. "The hedge is built of faith, not wood," Jesus whispered. "If you prepare with a heart of fear, the darkness will find you. But if you prepare with a heart of service, I will be your wall and your provider. The bread will not fail as long as you are willing to give it away." I felt a tear run down my face, even in the vision. I've spent so much of my life being afraid of not having enough. But he was showing me that in the kingdom, enough is a living thing. It grows when you let it go. I looked at the hospital room around me, the machines, the monitors, the plastic tubes. It all looked so flimsy. All of this is going to be gone, I realized. Every bit of it. "The window is closing, Claudia," Jesus said. His voice was becoming more distant, like he was calling from across a wide river. "Go back and tell them. Tell them to use the quiet week. Tell them to gather the trade goods. But most of all, tell them to stop being afraid. The darkness is just the room where I am waiting to meet them." I felt the pull again, that sudden jarring weight of my physical body. The nurses are still checking the monitors, adjusting the flow of the IV, and talking over me like I'm a piece of furniture they're trying to move. They don't know that while they're looking at my heart rate on a screen, I'm still looking at the heart of the world. Every time the door to this room swings open, the smell of the hallway, that mix of floor wax and old coffee, hits me, and it feels like a slap in the face. It's so solid, so real, but I know it's just a shell. I'm lying here in Gary, but my spirit is still vibrating with the weight of the things Jesus showed me. I look at my hands on the white sheets, and they look pale, like they haven't seen the sun in years. I keep thinking about the factory, about the steam and the noise, and how much time I wasted worrying about things that can be blown away in a single afternoon. I'm just a woman who spent her life trying to keep her head above water, working double shifts so my kids could have the things I never had. I've always thought that being a good person meant keeping my nose clean and minding my own business. But Jesus showed me that minding your own business is exactly what's going to lead so many people into the darkness. We've become a nation of strangers living behind locked doors, and he showed me that those locks won't hold when the water stops and the pumps go dry. I feel this ache in my chest, a deep, heavy guilt for all the times I walked past a neighbor and didn't even say hello. I was too busy, too tired, too focused on my own little world. Now I see that those little worlds are about to collide, and if we don't have the spirit to cushion the blow, we're going to shatter each other. Jesus saw that reflection in me. He didn't judge me for it. He just let the truth of it sit there between us like a heavy stone. He led me to the center of Gary, to the old stone cathedral that stood there since long before I was born. In the vision, it was November 2026. The city was a ghost of itself. The dry pump of July had left the streets littered with stalled cars, and the quiet week of April was a distant memory. I saw a line of people stretching for blocks, winding past the cathedral and down toward the lake. They weren't there for mass. I saw men in uniforms, people with clipboards and black tablets, standing under portable lights powered by loud, rattling generators. They were handing out small boxes of crackers and plastic pouches of water. But before anyone could take a box, they had to step up to a screen. I saw them pressing their thumbs against a glowing glass plate and repeating a set of words. "The digital oath," Jesus said, and his voice was full of a grief that made the very air tremble. In their hunger, they are trading their names for a promise of security. They are signing away their freedom to hear my voice in exchange for a crust of bread that will not satisfy their souls. I watched a young man I recognized, a boy who used to play basketball in the park near my house, stand at the front of the line. He looked thin, his eyes sunken and desperate. He pressed his thumb to the glass. He said the words. He took his box of crackers and walked away. But as he did, the small light in his chest, the one I'd seen in the Believers, just went out. It didn't flicker. It just vanished, leaving him looking like a hollow shell walking through the snow. The trade goods I told you to gather, Claudia, the seeds, the tools, the salt, they are not just for your belly, Jesus told me. They are so my children do not have to stand in that line. If you have a bag of grain and a way to grind it, you do not have to sell your soul for a cracker. If you have the medicine of the earth, you do not have to bow to the machine for a pill. Tell them, do not take the oath. Do not sign your name to their solution, no matter how cold the wind blows. I felt a terror then that was worse than the steam explosion. I thought about my kids. If they were hungry, if they were shivering in the Indiana winter, would I have the strength to tell them to stay away from the food lines? Would they listen to me? I realized then that the quiet week in April isn't just for purging bitterness. It's for building the kind of faith that can say no to a full stomach. It's about learning that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. I looked at the stone cathedral again, and I saw a different group. They were inside the church, huddled together in the pews. They didn't have generators. They didn't have tablets. They had a single wood stove they had vented through a window, and they were singing. The sound of their voices was soft, but it carried a frequency that seemed to push back the shadows. I saw an old woman, one of the lights, standing near the altar. She had a small bag of flour and a jar of oil. She was making small cakes and handing them to everyone in the room. I watched her hand out 50, 60, 100 cakes from a bag that shouldn't have held 10. This is the marketplace of the kingdom, Jesus said. It doesn't run on data or thumbprints. It runs on sacrifice and trust. You must tell my people to find their stone cathedrals now. Find the places where the Spirit is moving and build your foundations there. Do not wait for the freeze to find your family. The vision started to swirl, the snow and the stone blurring together into a tunnel of light. I felt the heat of the afterlife beginning to pull away, replaced by the sharp, stinging sensation of the hospital air. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in that church, even if it was cold, even if the world was falling apart, because Jesus was there. The peace in that room was more real than the safety of the world outside. Wait, I cried out. Lord, the dates. April 12th to the 18th. What if they don't listen? What if I can't find the goods? What if I'm not strong enough? He didn't move toward me, but I felt his hand on my heart one last time. It was a pressure that felt like it was sealing something inside me. You have the testimony, Claudia. That is the greatest trade good you will ever own. The words I have given you will be worth more than gold when the screens go black. Just tell them what you saw. The ones who are meant to hear will find the way. Remember, the thirst of April is a mercy to prepare them for the hunger of July and the silence of December. Use every day. The window is closing, but I am already standing on the other side of the darkness, waiting for you. I felt a sudden, violent jolt, like I'd been dropped from a great height. My lungs burned, and I realized I was screaming, but there was no sound. I opened my eyes, and the ceiling tiles were back, those little stars in the dark sky. I was gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I saw a doctor rushing toward me with a flashlight in his hand. I'm back. I'm in this bed in Gary, Indiana, and I have exactly 21 days until the quiet week begins. I have 28 days until the water stops. I look at the calendar on the wall, and the numbers look like they're bleeding. I need to get out of this bed. I need to get home. I have trade goods to buy and neighbors to talk to. I have a story to tell before the silence takes it away. The doctor, a man named Miller, who's looked after my kids since they had the measles, stood over me with a clipboard that was shaking. He didn't look like a man who'd just seen a miracle. He looked like a man who'd just seen a ghost. He kept clicking his pen, staring at the printouts from the machines that had been hooked up to me for the last 96 hours. He told me that when the steam pipe blew, the pressure that hit me was enough to flatten a steel drum. He said my heart hadn't just stopped. It had been silent for so long that the blood should have turned to lead in my veins. He told me that by every rule he'd learned in 30 years of medicine, I shouldn't be able to remember my own name, let alone be sitting up and asking for a glass of water. But I wasn't listening to his medical talk. I was looking at the clock on the wall, watching the second hand sweep past the 12. Every tick felt like a hammer hitting a nail. I'm 41 years old, and for the first time in my life, I understand that time isn't just something that passes. It's a gift that's being pulled back, inch by inch. I looked at Dr. Miller, and I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he leaned against the bed frame like he was carrying the weight of the whole hospital. I wanted to grab his coat and tell him to go home, to fill his bathtub with water, to find a way to stay warm without the hospital's massive boilers. But I knew he wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. I'm sitting here on March 29th, 2026, and I can still feel the warmth of Jesus' hand on my shoulder. It's the only thing keeping me from screaming. If you're listening to this, you've probably felt that same tightness in your own chest lately. You've looked at the news, you've looked at the prices at the store, and you felt that nagging voice in the back of your head telling you that something is wrong. You're not crazy. You're being warned. I was sent back to tell you that the window is closing, and the timeline I saw is as real as the scars on my arms from the steam. I need you to listen to these dates. Write them down on a piece of paper, not a phone, but real paper that you can hold in your hand when the screens go black. From April 12th to April 18th, 2026 is the quiet week. This is your final chance to fix what's broken inside. If you're carrying a grudge, drop it. If you've got an idol in your house, whether it's money or a screen or your own pride, get rid of it. This week is a gift of silence before the noise of the world starts to fail. Use it to pray, to repent, and to listen for the whisper of the Spirit. If you don't clean your house, then you won't be able to stand what's coming next. On April 19th, 2026, the water will stop. In Gary, in Chicago, and all across the Great Lakes, the pumps will fail. It won't be a one-day glitch. It will be a test of your thirst. You need to have water stored now. Don't wait for the sirens. Then comes the dry pump on July 4th, 2026. The fuel, the oil, the gasoline, it will all stop moving. The highways will become parking lots. You need your trade goods by then. $2,000 worth of seeds, hand tools, salt, and medicine. Not to hoard, but to share. This is how you build the golden threads of community that will keep you alive when the system tries to force you into a line. And finally, on December 25th, 2026, the deep freeze and the total blackout will hit. No phones, no internet, no heat, but what you've prepared. This is when the digital oath will be offered. They will tell you that if you just sign your name and give your thumbprint, they'll give you a box of food and a warm room. Do not take it. Stay in your stone cathedrals. Stay with your neighbors. Trust in the bread that multiplies and the oil that doesn't fail. I'm just a woman from the south side of Gary. I don't have a fancy degree or a big title. I'm just Claudia, the one who worked the steam lines until the world blew up in my face. But I met the King of Kings, and he told me that the darkness isn't the end. It's the beginning of the greatest awakening we've ever seen. He's calling a remnant together, People who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty and their hearts clean. The choice is yours. You can walk out of here and think I'm just a factory worker who got her brain scrambled by a pipe explosion. You can go back to your screen and your distractions and pretend that everything is going to be fine. Or you can look at the calendar and realize that the first date is less than a month away. You can choose to be the light that stays on when the world goes dark. I'm grateful you stayed with me through this entire testimony. If you've listened this far, I believe it's because something inside you recognized that this message matters. If you feel led, write a comment and tell me what nation or city you're watching from. I want to pray specifically for the places represented here. Subscribe if you haven't already and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming. And please share this video with at least 3 people you care about. A single share can change a life forever. My name is Claudia Torres, and I'm telling you, the water is about to stop, but the Spirit is just beginning to flow. Be ready.